I'm going to bring on our next speaker here. As I just said, Steve Laughlin. He's the CFO of Actinium Pharmaceuticals. Let's get my thing off the screen. Steve, good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Long time no see.
I said don't go far, and I meant it. All right, let's bring on your screen here. We got it. All right, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back at the Benzinga Small Cap Conference. Before I begin, just a disclaimer and safe harbor, as I will be making forward-looking statements, and please reference our filings with the SEC that may be filed and amended from time to time. To jump into Actinium, we are a late clinical stage biotechnology company focused on the area of targeted radiotherapy. We're advancing a pipeline of clinical stage assets we call antibody radiation-conjugates, which I'll highlight in just a little bit, as well as advancing a pipeline of earlier stage programs and a technology platform that we're very excited about. Our lead program, IMFB, is in pivotal phase 3 trial called Sierra. We're over 75% enrolled on that study and expect to complete enrollment this year. Sierra and IMFB is intended to condition patients for bone marrow transplant or stem cell transplant, which is the only curative treatment option for patients with certain types of blood cancers. We've evolved IMFB beyond transplant and are also studying it for conditioning for CAR T and gene therapy, also potentially curative treatment options. And then I mentioned our earlier stage clinical programs, that is Actimab A, where we're studying it in combination with existing therapies in relapse refractory AML patient population with significant unmet need. And then with our technology platform, we're leveraging a strong scientific backing, pedigree, extensive IP portfolio, and we're working in our collaboration with Astellas, a top 20 global biopharmaceutical company, as well as our own R&D efforts. Strong balance sheet. We finished 2020 with over $60 million in cash, which allows us to hit several milestones, including completing the Sierra phase 3 trial and top-line data from that. So a quick snapshot on the pipeline led by IMFB in the Sierra trial, where we will complete enrollment this year. Building out a portfolio and targeted conditioning in the area of CAR T. We're working in collaboration with Memorial Sloan Kettering in an NIH funded trial and collaboration. We're also working in the area of gene therapy, exploring that area with the team at UC Davis. And then you can see our earlier stage programs, including our combination trials with CLAG-M, which is a chemotherapy used routinely to treat patients with relapse refractory AML. And then with venetoclax, which is an approved therapy in 2 blood cancers, is becoming standard of care in AML. And we've demonstrated and presented very strong data from those combination trials that I'll highlight in just a bit. So I talked about targeted conditioning in the context of bone marrow transplant, CAR T, and gene therapy. And today, if patients are to go to these potentially curative treatment options, they need to be conditioned. And what that means is essentially wiping out their immune system, depleting immune cells so that they can receive the cells that they're going to be getting. And today, conditioning is done with chemotherapy and external radiation. These are non-targeted. They come with a lot of acute and chronic toxicities. There's a high risk of failure and even mortality that severely restricts patient access. And you can see on the chart on the bottom right, there's over 150,000 patients, 175,000 patients diagnosed with cancers potentially treatable with BMT. However, only 20,000 or so patients thereabouts actually go on to get a bone marrow transplant. So there's over 150 patients that we think could benefit from a transplant who are not receiving that today. And then those patient numbers can potentially grow when you factor in CAR T and gene therapy. So a multi-billion-dollar potentially addressable market. We licensed IMFB from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, a pioneer in the field of bone marrow transplant. They studied IMAB in about 300 patients, multiple clinical trials, multiple diseases. We elected to pursue development in AMLs. We felt it was an area with highest unmet medical need. Patients with relapse refractory AML who are over the age of 55 with active disease. Unfortunately, overall survival is typically measured in just a few months. The data that you see here on this slide is data in patients with relapse refractory AML as well as high-risk MDS, a similar related disease. And you can see on the right-hand side, the patients who received IMAB conditioning had about 30% one-year overall survival, and at 2 years, nearly 20% of patients were alive. This compares favorably to current approaches, including salvage chemotherapy and chemotherapy plus a bone marrow transplant, where 1 year survival is estimated to be about 10%, and at 2 years, unfortunately, very few, if any, of these patients are alive. The other thing to point out with IMAB is it works rapidly. Patients can go to a transplant in 12 days after receiving a therapeutic dose of IMAB, which with chemotherapy, it oftentimes takes at least a cycle, sometimes more. So best case, you're looking at 42 days. So in a disease that advances rapidly and where patients can deteriorate rapidly, speed is of the essence, and IMAB can deliver there. We took the data from the work that was done at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and we designed what is our pivotal phase 3 Sierra trial. It's a 150-patient study. Patients are randomized 1-to-1, either to receive IMAB and a bone marrow transplant or physician's choice of salvage therapy. There's approximately 20 agents available in the control arm, and that's simply because there is no standard of care in this patient population. The primary endpoint is 6 months durable complete remission, or DCR, and this is a multi-center study. The Sierra trial is currently active at about 25 leading comprehensive cancer centers in the United States and Canada, including some of the leading bone marrow transplant centers in the country, if not the world, such as MD Anderson, the Mayo Clinic, Washington University in St. Louis, Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and several others that you see listed down below. So we have presented safety and feasibility data from the first 75% of patients who have been enrolled on the Sierra study. This data that you see here was presented at the ASH annual meeting in December 2020, and then earlier this year at the TCT, or Transplantation and Cellular Therapy Conference. If you follow the trajectory of patients or the evolution of patients as you go left to right on the screen, looking first at bone marrow transplant and engraftment, you can see at the top of that column in blue that 100% of patients who got a therapeutic dose of IMAB went on and received the transplant and engrafted without delay. That compares favorably to patients on the control arm that you see at the bottom of that column in gray, where only 18% of patients who received salvage therapy were able to proceed to a transplant and engraft. That resulted in 82% of patients who were failures for the primary endpoint. The study does allow patients to cross over, and those who are still eligible to receive a transplant can receive a therapeutic dose of IMAB. And very pleased to report that 100% of patients who got a therapeutic dose of IMAB after failing salvage therapy and crossing over were able to proceed to transplant and also engrafted without delay. There was a lower rate of 100-day non-relapse transplant-related mortality in patients on IMAB of 4% compared to 20% on the control arm. And in order to gain approval, we believe we have to show a 2 times difference in the rate of durable complete remission at 6 months. And you can see to the far right that there are 43 patients potentially evaluable for the primary endpoint, or 77%, compared to 8 patients, or 14%, on the control arm. So we're very pleased with the data that we have seen thus far and what's been reported. And now we are focused on completing enrollment. which we expect to occur this year, working to complete enrollment as soon as possible so that we can present the top-line data on the primary endpoint, with, again, that being 6 months after completion of enrollment. I touched on our evolution beyond transplant and into areas of CAR T, cell therapy, and gene therapy. We're very excited about our I-Mab ACT collaboration with Memorial Sloan Kettering. Sloan Kettering is developing a CD19 targeting CAR T. There are several CD19 CAR Ts approved now. And we think that Memorial Sloan Kettering's construct, which they call 1928 Zeta, compares favorably in a clinical study in about 50 patients with relapse refractory ALL. They reported an 83% response rate. This compares favorably with the approved CAR Ts. They did note certain CAR T related side effects such as CRS or cytokine release syndrome, as well as neurotoxicity. So the idea is using lower doses of I-Mab-B that we call I-Mab ACT to create a better immune environment within the patient's body prior to them receiving their CAR T cells to hopefully reduce the rates and incidences and severity of those toxicities, CRS and neurotoxicity. We have started treating patients in this trial, and we expect to be able to present proof of concept data later this year. So stay tuned for updates on the I-Mab ACT program, but very excited to be working with the team at MSK, who is a leader in the field of cellular therapy and CAR T, and also very fortunate and thankful to have been awarded funding from the NIH. So in terms of targeted conditioning, as I said, this is a large, we think, multi-billion-dollar potentially addressable market. And we have a strategy to focus on targeted conditioning for multiple tumor types, whether it be bone marrow transplant, CAR T, other adoptive cell therapies or gene therapies. And we want to capitalize on the growth that these therapies are seeing and what we expect to continue to see. And what we also like about this market opportunity is that it's highly concentrated. The top 50 centers do a majority of the transplant procedures in diseases like AML. And for instance, the 25 or so sites in our Sierra trial account for 30% of the transplant volume. So we think it's an attractive market opportunity for several reasons. We also have our Actimab-A program, or our CD33 program. This came out of Memorial Sloan Kettering. Now over 125 patients, nearly 150 patients have been treated with our alpha-based therapies. We've advanced this as far as a phase 2 trial as a single agent, where we demonstrated and reported high single agent response rates, 69% in fact. However, going forward, we believe that using Actimab-A in combination with other therapies is the best pathway forward. Chemotherapy and targeted agents, where we have active programs, but also in the future looking at immunotherapy, leveraging radiation's potential ability to turn cold tumors hot and make them more addressable with immunotherapy, and also potentially cell therapy are areas that we want to go after. But I'll first touch on our phase 1 trial with Actimab-A in combination with CLAG-M, as we presented data from this trial at ASH in December. And what we demonstrated was at the most recent dosing cohort, 100% of patients achieved a remission. So we're very excited about that. That compares favorably to CLAG-M alone, where a 54% response rate, remission rate has been reported. Perhaps most exciting to us is the rate of MRD negativity, which you see on the chart to the top right. MRD negative means that patients have no detectable disease at very, very finite levels. So with Actimab-A and CLAG-M, of the 10 patients on the study thus far who achieved remission, 7 of those patients, or 70%, were MRD negative, which again compares favorably to CLAG-M alone, which in a prior study, it was reported 39% MRD negativity rate. So we're looking forward to completing this study. We have advanced this to add additional dose cohorts, and we'll have additional data from this study by the end of this year, 2021. And then in the case of the Actimab-A and venetoclax trial, we presented data also at ASH from the first dose cohort. This was a low dose of Actimab-A in combination with venetoclax. That dose of Actimab-A in prior trials has been shown to be subtherapeutic. When combined with venetoclax, 2 of 3 patients responded, including 1 patient who had a complete response. These are patients with relapse refractory disease. All patients were poor risk with adverse cytogenetics. Each patient had high risk markers, and the patient who achieved the complete response actually had a TP53 mutation, which is a mutation that typically is associated with very difficult to treat disease and poor patient outcomes. This is building on a synergistic mechanism of action that our team identified, leveraging the radioisotope payload. We demonstrated that targeted radiation can deplete certain molecules, certain proteins that have been implicated in venetoclax resistance, namely BCL2. So we're very excited to be working in combination with this agent venetoclax and look forward to completing this phase 1 study, and we'll have additional data later this year. Now, in addition to our clinical programs, we're very excited about our technology platform that we call AW, or Actinium Warhead Enabling Technology Platform. This is built on the scientific foundation of the company at Sloan Kettering, which we have since been expanding on. We are focused on growing our IP portfolio, which is now over 140 patents. We have extensive know-how, and when paired with our clinical development experience, we believe AW gives us a leadership position in the field of targeted radiotherapy, which has been a very active area in terms of acquisition activity, new company formation, investments, licensing, but most importantly, targeted radiotherapies have been emerging and improving outcomes for patients with multiple disease types. Our technology platform gives us the ability to work with multiple targets and also multiple isotopes, so tremendous flexibility. We are working with Astellas, who is a top 20 global biopharmaceutical company, who is using our technology platform in connection with some of their targeting agents. It's been disclosed that we're working in theranostics, looking at solid tumors. So we're looking to deploy our technology platform beyond targeted conditioning, beyond blood cancers, to move into solid tumors, create next generation ARCs, as well as continue to advance the pipeline and create new targeted radiotherapies, as well as new novel combinations. And R&D is an area that we've been investing in of late. We acquired research laboratories in New York City. We've been staffing those out, and we'll continue to invest in R&D to coincide with the advancements that we're making in the clinic. So we think it's an exciting time for Actinium. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a strong balance sheet, over $60 million in cash at the end of 2020. We are over 75% enrolled on the Sierra trial, complete enrollment this year. So expect to have top line data in 2022, and we'll then embark on pursuing FDA approval. Also expect several milestones from our Cd33 program with our Actimab-A combination trials, CLAG-M and venetoclax, and then also advancing our clinical collaboration in CAR-T with Sloan Kettering. And then, of course, as I just highlighted, our R&D efforts, we look forward to providing updates on our efforts there, and we'll continue to be making investments in R&D. So thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. Thank you for your interest in Actinium. Happy to take any questions that the audience may have.
Well, one quick one here before we let you go. It's about capital. Do you intend to raise capital before reaching full enrollment, and or before the phase 3 Sierra trial?
So what we've guided is our current cash position allows us, it funds us through completion of Sierra enrollment as well as through top line data. So we feel we're in a very good position from a balance sheet perspective at this time.
All right, Steve Laughlin, CFO of Actinium Pharmaceuticals, link, ticker, name, all up on the screen. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.